God, you failed. We've all heard it. We've all said it. We've all maybe even thought it to ourselves. But here's the thing about that, is there are lots of people in the Bible, and there's some few stories in the Bible that might actually have that phrase as a presence. And the thing of it is, though, is it's kind of hard to find because the words, God, you failed, don't show up. Those three words are never found in the Bible, but their undertones are. In the particular story that we're going to look at, I discovered these words, but they're, like I said, they're not written that way. So, but you can have that idea when you think about different people in the Bible. You got Paul. Paul first started his ministry after being a very, very big and powerful man against Christianity and against Christians, killing them, in fact. He was changed to Paul and then started following Jesus and started doing his ministry. People didn't buy that, though. People didn't think that that was honest of him. They didn't think that he had actually changed. So they kind of ran him out of town, and he was probably like, hey, wait a minute. I'm doing your work, what gives? God, like, you failed me here because now I'm being run out of my town. Then you got Moses, who had just been told by God, hey, go free these people from Egypt. Then he gets out there, and the first thing they come up against is the Red Sea. And they come up against the Red Sea, Egypt's pressing in, and then it's kind of like, well, God, this was good. Good job. The undertone had to be there because now you've got a couple million people standing by the banks of this water wondering what they're going to do. Some wanted to go back. Some didn't know what else to do. So Moses stands up at God's wish, and he says, just stretch your hands out over the sea. And he did, and then nothing happened again. And he stands there and watches. Maybe he sits down on a rock, kind of like, God, you failed. Something's got to give. Or otherwise, all these people and myself are going to die. You brought us here. You got Joseph, same thing. Joseph, up and down roller coaster ride of his life. He gets sold by his brothers, and it's like, family betrayed me. And then he finally kind of makes it big when he gets to Egypt, and then he gets accused of something that he didn't do and winds up in jail where he's forgotten about for a couple years. And then all of a sudden he rises to second in the land under Pharaoh. But he had to have along the way there his God, you failed moments. And so we see this stuff come up. And in this particular story, though, it's really prominent. It jumped off the page at me this last summer. And I actually wrote a blog post about it, but I wanted to kind of put words to that and put a voice to it as well. So we're going to look at the story of Lazarus here. And this story starts off with a great puzzling thing to me. It starts off with a setting, and it says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who poured expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. So the two sisters sent a message to Jesus saying, Lord, the one you love is very sick. Now, the one you love is very sick. That kind of says, oh, well, Jesus hopped on a donkey and went on his way. No, not really. He didn't do that. The Bible says, when they heard, so Jesus heard about it, and he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it is for the glory of God. I, the Son of God, will receive glory from this. And then verse 5 always kind of catches me off guard. It says, although he loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. So it says there's a love there. He stayed where he was for the next 2 days. And he did not go to them. And so that kind of brings up to me, it's kind of like, so he chose not to go to them. And it kind of brings back to some situations in life, like things aren't going the way that it was, and you think God will show up in a particular place or at a particular time, or you wouldn't let this happen, and you wouldn't let this event take place, or why did that happen? And it seems like he just stays away for a couple days just to watch us sweat. And it makes us feel bad, makes us turn against him sometimes, because that's what they did. So when Jesus finally decided to go to them, Verse 17 in John chapter 11 says, when Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in the grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many people had come to pay their respects and console Mary and Martha on their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Martha said to Jesus, here it comes, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Lord, if you'd been here. God, you failed. If you'd only been here, hello, where were you when this was happening? Hey, God, you failed. I lost my job. My marriage ended in divorce. My grandma died. God, you failed. Why didn't you heal her? And so we got this undertone here, and she comes out and she says, Lord, you failed. Lord, if you'd have been here, you could have healed my brother. She wasn't saying that just off the cuff, like she never had seen it before. She actually knew. She had seen what Jesus was capable of. She had heard stories if she didn't see it in person, but she knew that this was something that he could do. And so she says, Lord, if you'd only been here. So then he goes down to a little bit. She actually has a conversation with Jesus. And he's like, your brother will rise again. And she's like, well, yeah, in the resurrection at the end, in the last day, he'll rise again, yes. But no. And he kind of hints that, no, that's not the way that it's going to happen. And then, verse 30, now Jesus stayed outside the village at a place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house trying to console Mary saw her leave hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell down at his feet and said, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. So twice. And it's the God, you failed feeling that is there. So we kind of leave this moment here. And we visit the events of Palm Sunday. Because this whole idea is that God had a plan for all of this. But this first Easter, this Palm Sunday, they were living this. We know the end of the story, right? We got all the way through Revelation. We know this. They had through Malachi because they were living the gospel. So they knew the Old Testament stuff, but they had no clue what was going on. They were living it, just like you don't know tomorrow. And so this whole event now, Palm Sunday, Jesus is riding in on a donkey. This fulfills so many different things for them because they had probably heard for centuries. They knew the words back in Zechariah that Zechariah had said in Zechariah 9:9, where it said, look, people of Jerusalem, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, riding on a donkey. And so you get this whole story here. So then, now, fast forward, because 400 years separate the Old and New Testament. And so there was a lot of quiet, like heavy communication, talking about, hey, this guy is coming, okay, this Messiah is coming. But then you turn around and there's 400 years of silence. So you start with this great expectation and telling their family and their friends and generation to generation to generation. And then you get to about Luke 2 where Jesus is born, and probably the intensity has worn off of that. It's been 400 years. Still no Jesus, still no Messiah, still nothing. God, you failed. And then Jesus is born. So then we fast forward and he's riding in on Palm Sunday on a donkey's colt. Can you imagine all of the people? And some of them had just seen him raise Lazarus from the dead. So they're there watching this event. He's coming in, and they remember the words, see, your king is coming. Look, he's coming on a donkey's colt. And so now they've got this expectation. Jesus is king. He's going to be king. He's going to reign supreme. He's going to overthrow this entire Roman everything. He's going to take over the Pharisees and all of these people. He's going to make everything right. And he's going to be who he says he is, who we've been waiting for, our king that we've been promised. Then less than a week later, Jesus is arrested in the quiet of the night because they know that if they arrested him during the day, that this would be a big problem. So they arrest him at night, and then when daybreak happens, sure enough, these people kind of come in mass, and they realize that Jesus had been arrested, and now what? And then they watch as the events unfold, as he's put on trial after trial, and then they watch as he's sentenced to be crucified. And then he's crucified, and then he's put in a tomb. And all of their hopes and their dreams and everything they had planned, the king that was coming over to take over everybody, to be their king, to be their ruler, to lead them into the next phase of life, is now dead in a tomb. Everybody there. Some people rejoiced. Some people were happy. We want to talk about the elephant in the room. Some people were happy. They put Jesus there on purpose. They wanted to get rid of him. Some people were ecstatic and overjoyed that Jesus was dead. Some people were kind of in the middle. They didn't know what to think. Some people were full out heartbroken because they'd followed Jesus. They'd put, like I said, their hopes and dreams into Jesus. Then, of course, you got his mother who is at the foot of the cross with John, and you've got his friends there. Some of them scattered. But this whole feeling was there, and when it was all said and done, God, you failed. Like, this was supposed to be our king. This was supposed to be our Messiah, so we thought. And now he's dead. So now what? God, you failed. Way to go. Good job. Now I guess we'll wait another 400 years. And this feeling had to carry into, and it got worse as the weekend got on, and you get to Sunday. And this particular Sunday, there was no cause for celebration. There was no cause for joy or triumph or any kind of anything. And we get John's words in John 20, verse 1, early Sunday morning, while it was still dark. I don't think, and I was talking with somebody else about this, I don't think that John put those words while it was still dark to reiterate that it was early in the morning. I think he put that there as kind of like a descriptive word to kind of make the setting. It's kind of like the environment, the atmosphere that might have been in that town and surrounding villages and cities. This whole idea that it was just kind of dark. This place that was once just a few days prior full of celebration and now just kind of dark. I don't think John repeated himself because we didn't know what early in the morning meant. I think he repeated himself because he was adding a descriptor there to kind of maybe get the feeling of the environment. And now, what happens? So we know that this God you failed moment had to happen. Because in order for him to raise from the dead, he had to die. But in order for him to die, he had to experience all of this. And so then we see him raised from the dead. Everybody's overjoyed. Word starts to spread. Something better is coming along because Jesus still is king. But he wasn't the king in the way that they wanted him to be. He was the king that he was the king that he always was going to be. And we look back at Lazarus. Lazarus died only for Jesus to proclaim that he was the resurrection and the life less than a week before he was going to die on the cross and become the resurrection and the life. He couldn't have walked Lazarus out of that grave if Lazarus hadn't died. Paul gets arrested in Acts 16, doing the Lord's work, right? He gets arrested, put in jail, not just in jail, like inside jail, maximum security jail. Puts his feet in shackles, and he's sitting there. Now what? I'm trying to do your work, God, and now I'm in jail. People don't even know I'm in jail because I'm inside jail, in jail. Like I'm deep in jail. And he's sitting there with he's sitting there with Silas, and they just start singing. They turn their jail cell into a worship center, and then the biggest jailbreak happens. And God showed his power by letting them walk out of jail. Moses, sitting there on the banks of the Red Sea, all of a sudden the water parts and everybody walks across on dry land. That God you failed had to be ringing out there, but it walked across on dry land. And then, like Joseph, like I said, he was the second in command after all that he had been through. Sometimes we have to go through the God you failed moments. And if we're honest with each other, everybody has had those moments. Maybe you're in one of those moments. But Friday doesn't last forever because Sunday eventually comes. Friday didn't last forever for them. They may have thought that it was a crazy time, and I'm not going to say that, well, I wasn't there, but you have to think that it was just a time of confusion and sorrow and just all of this. But then Sunday came and word started coming, right? His disciples are kind of cooped up, hiding for their lives, really, because they were trying to eradicate Jesus, but they hear about it. And Mary comes to them, and they go and they see that the tomb is empty, and now what do they make of this? But don't be so caught up in your Friday that you miss Sunday. Luke 24, the road to Emmaus, there's two people that had seen the events of what happened to Jesus, and we pick them up on Sunday, and they're on this road, the road to Emmaus, and they're going home. But on their way home, right, they have this encounter with the risen Jesus, but they didn't know that it was him because they were so stuck in Friday and what had happened. They were so stuck there that they didn't see Sunday. They missed it. They were miles away from Sunday because they were so focused on what had happened. They were like, well, there's nothing left for us here. Let's go home. But yet, Sunday happened and they missed it. Don't miss Sunday because Friday is there. Friday happens, and I'm not making light of anything that ever happens to anybody. I'm not saying that whatever's happening to you isn't right or wrong or whatever. But what I am saying is that eventually Sunday does come. There's a time for rejoicing. There's something that God is working out for all of us. You see, Jesus is King. Jesus is reigning over us, and Jesus is making everything right, and he will one day be the King over everything. And he will be back here to make things right again. That's what this God you failed thing is God didn't fail. He set us up for something better. He had to take us through Friday so we could get to Sunday.